Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Around 2018, something felt off about my wife's behavior. Our kids were 5 and 7 at the time, old enough to tell you about their day without missing many details. They kept mentioning spending time at my wife's parents' house, which wouldn't normally raise any red flags except they lived almost 2 hours away. This was happening 2 or 3 times every week, basically whenever she wasn't at her part-time job at the local pharmacy. "Hey Sarah, the kids mentioned they've been spending a lot of time at your parents' lately," I said one evening. Yeah, Mom's been wanting to spend more time with them," she replied, not meeting my eyes. Sarah was never good at lying. She'd always look away and fidget with her wedding ring. I started tracking the mileage on her SUV and the numbers didn't add up. She was putting an extra 400 miles on the car every week. Something wasn't right. Then came the breakthrough. One afternoon, I walked into our home office and found a post-it note next to the keyboard with her Gmail password. The temptation was too strong. I logged in and found several email exchanges between her and her college best friend, Jessica. They discussed how Sarah was regularly sleeping with her high school ex-boyfriend. The emails also included them mocking his wife, making cruel comments about how she'd let herself go after having kids. I printed these emails and stored them safely. I needed more concrete evidence, so I called my friend Mike, who'd been on the police force with me years ago. He recommended a private investigator he knew named Dave. After paying Dave's retainer and sharing what I knew, he got to work. Within weeks, he had a detailed report with photos, timestamps, and locations. The pattern was clear. Sarah would drop the kids at her parents', meet this guy for lunch, spend a few hours at the Sunset Inn on Route 27, then pick up the kids and head home. I immediately contacted a divorce lawyer. My own childhood had been destroyed by my parents' affairs and the aftermath. I wasn't about to let history repeat itself with my kids. "Dave," I said during our next meeting, "I need you to dig deeper into this guy." Dave's investigation revealed everything. The man's name was Richard, married with 3 kids, working as VP of sales at his father-in-law's successful tech company. Perfect. I had my lawyer prepare the divorce papers and asked Dave for extra copies of his report, plus one final task. On a Tuesday morning in late 2018, Sarah was served divorce papers at the pharmacy where she worked. Simultaneously, Dave met with Richard's wife, Amanda, showing her everything we'd uncovered. "I had a feeling something was wrong," Amanda told Dave, her voice breaking. "I just never thought—" The aftermath was spectacular. While Sarah's infidelity didn't impact our divorce much, Amanda's reaction was nuclear. She emptied their joint accounts, took their kids, and left. When her father learned what Richard had done, he fired him on the spot. Since Amanda's family owned their house, Richard was evicted within weeks. "You can't do this to me," Richard had shouted at Amanda during one confrontation, according to court documents. This led to her brother stepping in and breaking Richard's nose. Multiple restraining orders followed, along with several police reports, criminal charges, and even jail time for Richard after he violated the restraining order. These days, Richard's completely off the grid. Last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona or New Mexico. Amanda took over her father's company after he retired and is doing great. As for Sarah and me, we maintain a civil relationship focused solely on the kids. Now that they're in college, I don't interact with her at all. I don't harbor any hatred. She's still my children's mother, and that's the only context in which she matters to me anymore. The next one is an entitled People's Story. I never thought I'd have to deal with homeowner association drama living on my family's historic farmland, but here we are. This is the story of how an entitled homeowner association chairwoman tried to assert control over my property that wasn't even in their jurisdiction, and how it backfired spectacularly. Some background: I inherited my great-grandparents' farmhouse and the surrounding 15 acres when my grandmother passed away 2 years ago. The house was built in 1892 and has been in our family for 4 generations. It's located just outside city limits in a rural area that's slowly being developed into suburban neighborhoods. About 6 months ago, a new housing development called Oak Ridge Estates started construction on what used to be the Johnson family farm next door. The developer bought up 100 acres and subdivided it into quarter-acre lots for cookie-cutter McMansions. Of course, they established an homeowner association to maintain their prestigious community standards. I didn't pay much attention to the construction at first. My property is well maintained. I keep the grass cut, the historic white fence painted, and the house in good repair. It's not fancy by modern standards, but it's clean and tidy. I have a large vegetable garden, some free-range chickens, and a few rescue horses I keep in the back pasture. Pretty standard stuff for a rural property. The trouble started when Karen Williams, the newly elected homeowner association chair, showed up at my door one Saturday morning in her pristine white Range Rover. I was covered in dirt from working in my garden when I answered her aggressive knocking. "Can I help you?" I asked, wiping my hands on my jeans. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "I'm Karen Williams, chairwoman of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. We need to discuss several violations on your property." I blinked at her in confusion. "Ma'am, this property isn't part of Oak Ridge Estates. This is the old Miller farm. It's been here for over 100 years. Karen's perfectly penciled eyebrows drew together. "That's irrelevant. Your property is visible from our development and impacts our property values. We'll need you to make some changes to comply with our community standards." She pulled out a tablet and started scrolling through a list. "First, that chicken coop needs to go. Livestock is strictly prohibited. The vegetable garden in your front yard must be removed. Only ornamental landscaping is permitted. That fence needs to be replaced with our approved black aluminum fencing. And your house," she wrinkled her nose, "needs to be painted in an approved color from our palette. That weathered white paint is an eyesore." I couldn't help but laugh, which only made her face turn red. "Ms. Williams, I appreciate you stopping by, but I'm not part of your homeowner association. My property predates your development by over a century and isn't under your jurisdiction. I won't be making any of those changes." "Listen here," she snapped, jabbing a manicured finger at me. "I don't care how long your ramshackle farm has been here. This is an upscale community now. Our homes start at $800,000. We won't have our property values destroyed by your rural aesthetic." She said it like it was a dirty word. "Again, I'm not in your homeowner association. You have no authority here. Please leave my property." I started to close the door. She stuck her foot in the doorway. "I'm not finished. The Homeowner Association Board will be conducting an inspection of your property next week to document all violations. We expect full compliance within 30 days or we'll be forced to take legal action." I firmly pushed her foot back and closed the door in her face. Through the window, I watched her storm back to her Range Rover, typing furiously on her phone. The next day, I found a certified letter in my mailbox from the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowner Association, listing my alleged violations and demanding access to my property for inspection. I took the letter straight to my lawyer, Jim Thompson, who had handled my grandmother's estate. He got a good laugh out of it. "They have absolutely zero authority here," Jim assured me. "Your property isn't part of their development or homeowner association. They can't force you to do anything. But let's nip this in the bud before it escalates." Jim sent a strongly worded cease and desist letter to the Homeowner Association Board and their lawyer, explaining that my property was not under their jurisdiction and any attempts to enter my property without permission would be considered trespassing. Did that stop Karen? Of course not. The following week, I came home from work to find Karen and 3 other Homeowner Association board members walking around my property with clipboards, taking photos. My security cameras caught them trying to peek in windows and even attempting to enter my barn. I called the sheriff's department immediately. Deputy Matthews arrived just as Karen was measuring my front porch with a laser measure. "Ma'am, this is private property and you're trespassing," Deputy Matthews informed her. "The property owner has asked you to leave." "We have every right to be here," Karen declared, waving her clipboard. "This property is violating numerous homeowner association regulations and devaluing our community." "Ma'am, this property is not part of your homeowner association," Deputy Matthews explained patiently. "You have no authority here. You need to leave now or you'll be arrested for criminal trespass." Karen and her minions finally left, but not before she shouted, "This isn't over. We'll see you in court." True to her word, the Homeowner Association's lawyer filed a lawsuit the next week, trying to force my property under their jurisdiction through some creative legal gymnastics. They claimed that since my property was surrounded by their development, I bordered it on only one side, I was obligated to join their homeowner association and comply with their regulations. Jim was ready for them. He filed a motion to dismiss, complete with original property deeds showing my land predated their development by over 100 years, county records proving my property was outside their development's boundaries, satellite images showing my property wasn't surrounded by their development documentation, that my property was specifically excluded from their homeowner association's jurisdiction in their own filing papers. Security camera footage of their trespassing. The judge was not impressed with the homeowner association's arguments. At the hearing, she repeatedly asked their lawyer to explain what legal authority the homeowner association had over my property. They had none. This is a frivolous lawsuit, the judge declared. The plaintiff has no standing and no authority over the defendant's property. Case dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering the homeowner association to pay the defendant's legal fees and imposing sanctions for filing a frivolous lawsuit. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Karen apparently took the legal defeat personally. She started a smear campaign on the neighborhood Facebook group claiming my eyesore of a farm was destroying property values. She encouraged residents to call code enforcement about my unauthorized livestock and unsightly garden. The code enforcement officer who came out was actually interested in my heirloom tomatoes and asked for gardening tips. He found 0 violations. Karen then tried claiming my rescue horses were dangerous animals that threatened children's safety. Animal control found my horses to be well cared for and properly contained, with all required permits in order. The final straw came when I caught her on my security cameras at 2 a.m. attempting to open my chicken coop to release those filthy birds. Unfortunately for her, my cameras also caught her vandalizing my historic fence with spray paint. I called Deputy Matthews again. This time, Karen was arrested for vandalism and attempted theft of livestock. The security footage was indisputable. The story made the local news, complete with Karen's mugshot and footage of her trying to break into my chicken coop in her designer pajamas. She was forced to resign from the homeowner association board. The homeowner association had to pay over $15,000 to restore my historic fence. The new homeowner association board sent me a formal apology and assured me they would respect my property rights. They even invited me to their community BBQ as a gesture of neighborly goodwill. I declined the BBQ invite, but I did send over a basket of fresh eggs and vegetables from my garden. Kill 'em with kindness, as my grandmother would say. These days, things are peaceful again. My chickens still cluck happily in their coop, my horses graze in the back pasture, and my garden produces enough vegetables to share with appreciative neighbors, even some from Oak Ridge Estates who've discovered they actually like having a small farm next door. Karen moved away shortly after her arrest, apparently to a gated community with higher standards. Good riddance. The best part? My property value has actually increased significantly since the development went in. Turns out lots of people appreciate having a slice of historic farmland next door, complete with farm-fresh eggs and vegetables. My grandmother would be proud. She always said, "Stand your ground when you're in the right, but don't forget to be kind when you win." Words to live by. I've since installed better security cameras and reinforced the chicken coop locks, just in case the next homeowner association chair gets any ideas. But somehow I don't think they'll be bothering me again anytime soon. The local paper did a feature story about the history of my farm and the importance of preserving historic properties. They interviewed several Oak Ridge Estates residents who said they specifically bought their homes because they loved the view of my charming historic farmhouse. Take that, Karen. I still get Christmas cards from Jim, usually with a chicken-related joke inside. And Deputy Matthews stops by occasionally to buy fresh eggs and swap stories about entitled people he encounters on the job. Looking back, I'm actually glad Karen tried to mess with my farm. It helped me appreciate what I have even more, and showed me how many people in the community support preserving our area's rural heritage. Plus, it's a great story to tell when people ask about the security cameras on my chicken coop. My great-grandparents built this farm with their own hands. My grandparents kept it going through hard times. My grandmother loved every inch of this land. And no entitled homeowner association chair with delusions of authority was ever going to change that. The farm is still here, still producing food, still providing a home for rescue animals, and still standing as a reminder that sometimes the old ways are worth preserving, no matter what the homeowner association thinks. And those chickens? They're still happily laying eggs every morning, blissfully unaware they were almost liberated by a Range Rover driving homeowner association chair in designer pajamas. Some things are better left unchanged. The next one is a petty revenge story. When I was around 8, my mom and I moved in with her boyfriend, who had shared custody of his 2 kids. His son was 2 years older than me, and his daughter was 4 years older, and they did not like my mom and I in their home. They bullied and teased me, but I didn't really understand what was happening at first. They would dare me to do super dangerous stuff in hopes that I would get hurt or in trouble, like jump off the roof or climb a 10-foot spiky fence, ride my skates down an outdoor staircase that led to a busy street. When they volunteered to teach me how to ride a bike, they just kept crashing me on purpose and laughing. They invited me to a sleepover and covered me in honey and peanut butter when I fell asleep first. The daughter was really into cats. She had an outdoor cat named Scotty 2 Hottie, after her favorite wrestler, and she would sneak him in when the adults were gone, but she had gotten caught and in trouble for it. I, being a weird little kid, used to enjoy mimicking accents and animal sounds. I told her I was practicing my meow and asked if I sounded like a cat. She told me no, I sounded nothing like a cat, I sounded stupid. I had gotten feedback from others, it was a good meow, and had a feeling she was just being mean because I was looking for an excuse to interact with her. I held on to my growing resentment, and sometime after that incident, the daughter and I were left alone in the house. When she was in her room, I told her I was going to play in the backyard, then I faked that I had accidentally let the cat in. She got upset because she didn't want to be grounded again, and demanded we start looking for the cat, so I pretended to help, going from room to room, then hiding and letting out a meow. She would rush to the area she thought she heard him, and I would sneak to another area. We did this for a while until we heard our parents' car pull up and she started freaking out. She was yelling at me from another area of the house that she was not going to get in trouble on my behalf. I hid under the bed in our parents' room and meowed, and she said something like, "Scotty baby, please come out, I don't want Dad to get rid of you," and crouched to look under the bed for him. When she saw me, I said, "I thought you said I didn't sound like a cat." The next one is a malicious compliances story. My great-uncle passed away at 97, and I heard this great story of malicious compliance at his memorial service today. He worked for over 50 years at the same confectionery factory, and for most of that time he was a boiler room attendant. This was just after World War II, and at the time most of the machines and processes were powered by steam, even the heating. The steam was generated by massive boilers, and it was his job to monitor the boilers to make sure nothing went wrong. These boilers could potentially explode, causing great damage. By law, the boiler had to be attended at all times, and there were shifts that watched them around the clock, even when the factory was closed. They took so long to heat up that it was easier and cheaper to leave them running at night. After about 10 years of no incidents, the company hired a leading hand who would also act as the safety officer. He had been a sergeant in the army, and he took his job quite seriously, being quite the disciplinarian. He instituted a multitude of new procedures, some warranted, some just to establish control. The first time he wanted to conduct a fire drill, he went around telling the staff that when they heard the alarm, they had to exit the building in an orderly fashion. He got to the boiler room, and it was my great-uncle on duty that day. He informed him he would not be able to evacuate with everyone else and had to stay with the boiler. The safety officer didn't give him time to explain why. He just bluntly informed him that he was to treat the fire drill as if it was a real fire. No exceptions. When the fire bell finally rang, my uncle did exactly what he was told to do. He turned off the gas to the boilers, vented all the built-up steam, purged the water, and joined everyone outside. At the evacuation point, they were doing a head count when the production manager spotted my uncle and immediately approached him and asked what he was doing away from the boiler. He said he was participating in the fire drill as instructed, but not to worry as he had shut the boiler down completely. The color immediately drained from the manager's face. He was asked how long it would take to bring the boilers back online. Apparently it would take hours alone just to fill the boilers with water and heat them up. The big issue was that because they had done an emergency purge, they were required to inspect every pipe, joint, and connection for damage before to make sure it was safe to start to reheat. The other boiler men were called in and they got paid double time to work through the night to get the boiler ready for the next day. Production staff all got sent home but still got paid for the day as it wasn't their fault the factory couldn't run. It cost them a day's production as well. Safety officer did keep his job, but for the next 40 years the boiler staff were all exempt from fire drills. The next one is an entitled people's story. Here's a quick one where a customer was triggered just for one damn word. I used to handle customer service for Amazon some time ago, and I got this one phone call where a customer was asking to return something she ordered. I can't remember the reasons why. Okay, sure enough. Let's go ahead and create a return label for her to return the goods. I explained the whole drill for the return, and at one point she asked what was the amount of the refund because she was within the 90-day return window and was expecting the full amount. When I explained the amount, this is where things went wrong. This is how the convo went. Okay, this is the amount you get as soon as we get the goods back. It will be $64.99. Absolute silence. Did you say bucks? Are you serious? Did you say bucks? This is unacceptable. Get me a supervisor now. As I was reaching out to a soup within my office, I was kind of blown away by how a customer snapped just for one word choice. In the end, my soup eventually took over and resolved the customer's issue while I immediately took another call because we had a huge queue. The next day, I was sitting alone during my lunchtime and the sup sat next to me. We talked casually about the customer who demanded a sup just for my choice of words. According to him, the customer stated that, "Tell your management that the agent who took my call is an incompetent who doesn't know how to talk." I sighed with a face that looked like, I don't get paid enough for handling people with such a short fuse. My sup read through my face and then retorted, "No worries. QA also checked the call and certainly there was nothing wrong with it. Let's just avoid using that word for now." A few weeks later, I got another call from the same customer. She called because her account was locked on suspected fraud. I was like, okay, let's see what we can do here. But as soon as the customer heard my voice, she snapped again and demanded me to reach out to a sup. "I remember you. You are that weirdo who talks like a dumbass teenager. Get me your..." Click. At this rate, I had enough of customers taking it out on agents who simply did their best assisting them. QA once again got this call to check, but I was actually let go, as it was one of the few instances where hanging on the customer was valid. She went obnoxious for no reason, or in this case, just a matter of wording. Nothing ever came out of the QA audits of these two calls, and the customer remained banned from what I heard on the last days running customer service before calling it a day. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.